Okay. So this picture is a drawing, and it's a drawing by an individual named Ernst Haeckel, and his idea was that as humans are developing inside the wombs of their mothers, that we go through the same evolutionary stages that we went through at the very beginning when life first came about. Because again, the idea is that life began with a single-celled organism, which eventually branched off into a type of worm, which branched off into a type of fish, and then you had reptiles and mammals and primates, and then eventually humans came along. And so his idea was that you actually go through these stages while you're developing inside your mother. And so what he did is he looked at examples of these embryos and he drew what they look like. And you can see all the way on the left here, these are actually in German, I believe. So you can't read some of them. So this says fish. Folks, please end the conversations. Thank you. So this says fish. And this is a salamander. You've got a chicken here. You've got a pig, some sort of lamb and rabbit there. And finally, you have a human. So the idea here was that when a human is an embryo, because we look the exact same as a fish or a salamander or something like that, we're really no different at that point in our development. And this was actually, this idea, one of Darwin's more famous quotes was that he said, "It's the strongest single set of facts that supports my theory." This evidence of recapitulation, that we go through these various evolutionary stages. And you can see where the topic of abortion would come into this. Because if you're a human and you're just going through the stage in your development where you're just a reptile or a primitive mammal, then if you choose to terminate that pregnancy, you're not ending the life of a human, you're ending the life of that fish or that reptile or that mammal. And so it really opened up the door to this. So Harry Blackmun was a Supreme Court justice who was on the court during the original Roe v. Wade decision in 1973, and he accepted this idea into evidence for that Supreme Court opinion there. That's actually where the idea of trimesters come from. So we all know about trimesters. The first trimester is about 14 weeks or so. And that whole idea came from that Supreme Court decision because they were trying to figure out, they were trying to give meaning to each of those stages of development. Like in the first trimester, you're really not human, they would say. And in the second trimester, you got some human characteristics, but you're definitely not there yet. And in the third trimester, you're starting to become more of a human. So that's where all that came from. And this whole idea and this picture of recapitulation has been in textbooks for a long, long, long time, generations upon generations. And it wasn't until 1997 that somebody actually decided to try and take a picture of these embryos at these stages of development. And you can see, now we have the names in English here. So you have Haeckel's drawings up top, and on the bottom are the actual pictures there. So it turns out these were just faked. And again, this is something that we have to deal with on a regular basis when we're dealing with folks trying to forward the theory of evolution. But it wasn't until somebody actually took these pictures, they're from Richardson in 1997, that everybody figured out that what he did was completely incorrect and misleading. So just to give you an idea of how far off this stuff is, this is a picture of my son John, who's 3 now, and as far as the timeline goes for recapitulation, at this stage in his development, he should have been going through the reptile stage. And he definitely does not look like a reptile. I can pick out his smile. He looks just like my boy right there. And so even though this misrepresentation was in the front of everybody's mind for such a long time, the damage has been done. Of course, we have lots and lots of abortions taking place every single day, 3,000 in the U.S. About 1 in 4 pregnancies end in abortion. And when you look worldwide, there are 125,000 abortions every single day. And that comes to 45 million every single year. And those numbers come from the World Health Organization there. Now, this speaks to something that I certainly had been misrepresented on when I was going through my secular education. This class is nothing if not a compendium of ways that I was lied to as I went through my public education. And what I was always taught was that when you're in that first trimester, what you have inside of a pregnant person is not human whatsoever. It's just a clump of cells. I can hear my teacher just put it that way. And I had no idea how wrong that was. Let me tell you just a couple of things about the first trimester here. So at 6 weeks, and when we say these in terms of weeks, this doesn't mean that you've been pregnant for 6 weeks. When you hear the weeks of pregnancy, it actually starts 2 weeks before conception. So at 6 weeks of pregnancy, which is really just 4 weeks after conception, your baby has a nose, a mouth, ears, intestines, and a brain. At 7 weeks, they have arms, legs, hands, and feet. At 10 weeks, they're even developing nails. So when you're still firmly in the first trimester, your baby looks like this. This is just a picture from babycenter.com. It's a place you go to kind of see how your baby looks as you go through pregnancy. And folks, this is not just a clump of cells. This is a human. These are our brothers and sisters. Does anybody remember from Old Testament what God said to Cain when he killed his brother? He said, "The blood of your brother cries out to me from the ground." Folks, if one murdered individual, if their blood cries out to God, what do you suppose 45 million babies killed in the womb sounds like every single year? Thank God we can't hear it, because it would overwhelm us. Now, one thing that we've been talking about a lot over the course of our semester is how mutations mess things up. Ultimately, mutations are the reason you're going to die, but they're the cause of a lot of other bad things other than death. And one of those things is the fact that if you have the wrong things go wrong in your body, there's no way that you can conceive. In fact, 10% of people who want to have kids struggle with it. For every one baby that is put into adoption and adopted by a family, there are 36 families waiting in the wings for their prayers to be answered. And this comes to 2 million people. Now, I don't want you to think that I have a wrong idea here, and I heard a lot of people mention this as I was going around. I know it's not perfect. What I also know is that there are a lot of loving families out there who are fervently praying for their opportunity to raise a child. I have a little bit of personal experience with this. One of my best friends who lives in Minnesota, he and his wife were struggling to have kids, and they went on the list for adoption, and they waited and they waited and they prayed and they prayed, and nothing just was coming of it. And they actually changed their official residence to Florida so they had a better chance of getting an adoption. And eventually they did adopt a child, Gabriel, and he's my godchild now. And they're extremely happy, and their prayers were answered. So what I want you to take away from this slide really is that, you know, God forbid if you find yourself in the position of being pregnant, or you have a loved one that's pregnant, and you don't have the means or the desire or the ability to raise that child, please consider adoption. You might be the answer to somebody's prayer. Of course, the Bible is not silent on this issue either. The big thing when you're talking about the issue of abortion is really whether or not that's an actual human in there. So the Bible answers this question in a very straightforward way. Surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. So you can't be sinful unless you're a human. So if you were sinful from the time you were conceived, you were a human from the time you were conceived. Jeremiah 1 verses 4 and 5 say, "The word of the Lord came to me saying, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." Isaiah 49 verse 1, "Before I was born, the Lord called me." And then one of my favorites, Psalm 139, 13 to 16, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful, I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place, when I was woven together in the depths of the earth. Your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book, before one of them came to be." Folks, make sure that you know, above all else, that God made you, that you are special to Him, and that He loves you with an incomprehensible, inexpressible love that's so great there's no way you or I could ever hope to wrap our minds around that. And He didn't just start loving you when you were born or at the end of your first or second trimester. He's loved you since the moment He began knitting you together, and even before that. The exact same thing is true of that tiny little unborn baby that maybe your friend didn't plan for and doesn't really want. Regardless of how much they love or don't love that child, God loves them. He has the exact same love for that unborn baby that He has for you and me, and it's our responsibility to reflect that love and to treat them accordingly. I want to just close this with one more thing. This is going to be very politically incorrect. And I have visions of my third hour bristling in their seats as I spoke it. But it's something that I think should be common sense, and I think it's something people need to hear. When you have sex, it carries with it the possibility that you will create a human life. Not just an animal life, not just a clump of cells, a human life, a person with an immortal soul. And if you're not ready and willing to deal with that responsibility, you shouldn't be having sex.